you need help, use what I do is you're going to want to keep all of your math work with you because your math work
My daughter had always been a good student, always loved school. Then suddenly, in the 4th grade, just kind of quit. She wasn't interested in school anymore. She'd struggle to get out of bed, she'd fake being sick. Getting her to complete her homework was a total battle. It's as if almost overnight she decided school wasn't for her. After she brought home a bad score on a math test, we requested a meeting with her teacher.
Well, my concern is when she comes home, for example, this math test brought it up again, which is she pulls up the math test, okay, what did you do wrong? And she seems to have absolutely no idea. I know her well enough to where she's testing is
not where she should
way
be.
below. One of the things I've just been thinking about is, you know, we had a very frank talk the other night before she fell asleep, and I don't know how to work through this, but she just kind of said, I said, well, describe to me how you feel in class, like what's going on? Because, as I said, it's as if she was never here for some of the, now sometimes she's not here, but when she is here, she's not here, and clearly there's talking going on and whatnot, but I said, so when you're looking up at, you know, it's math time. What are you feeling? And she said, I look up and I'm not interested.
Really? My daughter's in law school right now, and Scout, everybody who gets to law school has to be pretty smart to get there, right? So it's a lot of people who are really smart in law school, and my daughter is hit for the first time. It's really hard for her. Truthfully, you're building your character right now. You're building that perseverance and that sense of I want to do my best.
Now freeze. Look at that face right there. I know that face. That face is saying, this is bullshit. This whole thing called school is bullshit. Now, later that night, after this conference at home, I'll tell her that school seems meaningless now, but later, when she's applying to college or when she's looking for a job, she'll understand what this was all for. She needs to take this seriously now because one day, she'll see that this will all make sense. But after spending 2 years working on this film, I now worry these things that I've told my daughter and my son are a lie. The idea of enduring the drudgery of standardized tests, traditional homework, lectures will build the kind of character in them that will one day lead to a happier life may no longer be true. Consider this economist out of MIT who argues that kids who will go on to do well in school and graduate from college won't necessarily be able to find a job. Most parents today grew up in a world which saw the U.S. economy grow and median income grow with it. And that's always been true. Until here. Curiously, around the late 90s, the economy had grown, but middle-class income had not. In essence, the U.S. economy is now able to produce more wealth while hiring fewer and fewer people. And this is troubling, particularly for college graduates. In addition to being saddled with record levels of debt, 53% of all recent college graduates either can't find a job or are working at a job they could have just as easily have found if they'd skipped school altogether. This trend, according to The Economist, is not because of the recession. It's not because China is stealing all of our jobs. It's because of a startling shift in technology that's probably best illustrated in an event that occurred back in 1997.
Garry Kasparov is one of the world's all-time great chess players. He played a series of matches against an IBM supercomputer called Deep Blue, and in 1997, Deep Blue beat him. Not by a lot, by a pretty narrow margin, but at that point, the world's best chess player was no longer a human being. The story I've heard is that the supercomputer geeks at IBM were looking around for the next challenge after Deep Blue beat Kasparov, because computer chess just became uninteresting. And the story goes, one of the IBM executives or managers responsible for thinking about this was in a bar one night, and he noticed that everyone in the dining room got up in the middle of dinner, left their half-eaten steaks on their plates, and ran into the bar to watch TV. And he thought some amazing sporting event was going on. It turns out they ran in there to watch Jeopardy because Ken Jennings was in the middle of an amazing run as a Jeopardy champion. He won 73 times in a row, took home more than $3 million, and became kind of a folk hero in America because he really did appear to have been genetically engineered and raised from birth by ninjas to play the game of Jeopardy. And at that point, the story goes, the IBM exec said, I know what our next challenge is. We're going to build the Jeopardy playing supercomputer.
And welcome everyone to a very special Jeopardy event. This is Watson.
I get a phone call and they said, IBM built that computer to beat you at Jeopardy. Would you be up for this? I'm like, yes, this is like the greatest thing I've ever heard. This is what the future seemed like to me as a kid. Robots would be playing on TV game shows, But also, I had like a pretty good idea that I was gonna win. I was a computer programmer before I went on Jeopardy, so I'd taken like artificial intelligence classes at college. And I knew that there was no computer out there that could do what you would have to do to win at Jeopardy. Computers are terrible at understanding all language. But Jeopardy clues are worse than most. They've got double meanings and puns and literary allusions and red herrings. There's a lot of dots that have to be connected, a lot of intuition going on. And computers are bad at making those kind of leaps.
For the iron fitting on the hoof of a horse or a card-dealing box in a casino. Watson.
What is issue?
You are right. You get to pick. Wanted for killing Sir Danvers Carew. Appearance pale and dwarfish. Seems to have a split personality.
Who is Hyde?
Hyde, yes. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Either one acceptable. You're now in the lead with 1,400.
Who is Michael Phelps?
Yes. Go.
What is Event Horizon? Who is Grendel? What is The Last Judgment?
Correct. Go again.
I was standing to Watson's right, and Watson actually has a little mechanical thumb, so I can hear this sort of insectoid clicking. And as his score mounted, I remember thinking, this is it. It's sort of like, I sort of felt like, some 80s Detroit auto worker on the assembly line looking at the robot who had replaced him on the welding machine. I thought my job of knowing things was not going to be replaceable by a computer. And yet, here it is, I'm obsolete, and I'm obsolete on national television. So maybe game show contestant is the first information age job to be made obsolete by our new computer overlords, but I feel like it's not going to be the last.
This is a jobs report that appeared on the Forbes website, and it's just kind of a vanilla-looking report about corporate earnings. The only thing interesting about it to me is that it was generated entirely by an algorithm. There was no human being involved in producing this or writing it or editing it. The company's called Narrative Science, and what they do is take a body of facts, in other words, all the details of corporate earnings, and they write a prose narrative about it. And if you read these, they are perfectly clean, clear English prose. Now, only a few years ago, we couldn't do this. If you wanted to have something written, you had to involve a human being in that work. And the consequence that I spend a lot of time thinking about is, what are people going to do for a living when their muscle power really isn't valued anymore because we have all kinds of muscle accelerators? And then their mental power is not as valued anymore because we have these astonishing digital technologies that can do mental things, cognitive things that we used to previously require people to do.
Very soon we're going to get to a world where, a vast chunk of the American middle class has a job that can be a formerly safe job that can be done by a computer or a robot. What happens to society when hundreds of millions of people have that aimless, rudderless feeling of you know. I've been replaced by a very small box or a very short shell script. I don't know if there's a solution.
The last significant change in the way we educated our kids occurred around 124 years ago. It was the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. Most kids were raised on farms, and jobs were plentiful and predictable. Then, in 1843, an educator from Massachusetts decides to visit Prussia on his honeymoon, where he witnesses a brand new type of education. Up until that time, education primarily consisted of smart people sitting around talking to other smart people. But after the Prussians were embarrassed in the Napoleonic Wars in the 1800s, this Prussian decides to institute a new type of education for every German boy from 7 to 14 years old, which results in a more fit, more organized, more obedient army. Among his many reforms was this idea: to divide up instruction according to age, ability, and subject matter. Strange as it seems today, this had never been done before. This idea of teaching math in one room, science in another room, language skills in yet another was totally new. Horace Mann witnesses this new educational model and he's stunned. Inspired by what he sees, he brings these educational ideas back to the US, where it captures the attention of these men. Just like the Prussians, who were anxious to develop more obedient troops, these fathers of the Industrial Revolution were desperate to transform our nation of disorganized farm laborers into trained, efficient workers for their factory and assembly line jobs.
We divide the day up in high schools into bits of time, into 40 or 50-minute blocks typically, and then we ring bells and people start to shuffle around the building and do something else. That's an organizational device, it's not an educational principle. And it is, in broad sweeps, a system that resembles a factory culture.
If you built a factory in upstate New York and another along the Ohio River, you desperately needed these workers to behave similarly, to know the same kinds of things. If high school graduates in Ohio could quote Shakespeare, but students in New York couldn't even write their own name, it was difficult to build a standard set of factories which utilized both sets of workers. That's when it was decided to form a committee called the Committee of 10. The committee was tasked with coming up with a standard set of subjects every kid should know.
10 university heads in 1890 said, in 11th grade, everyone should learn chemistry. In senior year, everyone should learn physics, and that it should be earth science. They came up with this whole trajectory calculus, and a lot of these subjects are great, but these priorities were dictated 120 years ago, 124 years ago.
Back in 1892, the Committee of 10 designed our nation's curriculum, and for the most part, it has not changed.
The biggest employer in Baltimore 50 years ago was Bethlehem Steel Company. You could actually drop out of high school 50 years ago, join the steel union, get a perfectly average job, earning a perfectly average wage, which would entitle you to get a perfectly average mortgage, to buy a perfectly average house, with a perfectly average yard, to have 2.0 perfectly average kids, who would go to a wonderful perfectly average public school. You could have a perfectly average retirement and have a perfectly average funeral. That is no longer the case.
The economy that we created over the course of the 20th century was an economy that needed a large number of moderately skilled people who could do the 3 R's and who could follow pretty simple instructions. As we head deeper into the 21st century, I really don't think that's the case anymore, yet our educational system still seems to be focused on turning out people with that same relatively small set of skills. My fear is that they're heading into a society and an economy and a workforce that doesn't value those skills very much anymore. And I think we need to take a good hard look and figure out what kinds of people, what kinds of skills are demanded in the technologically extraordinary society and economy that we're creating.
I went to law school for reasons that I've never really figured out, and I kind of dropped out after I just need a couple more courses. And then I have a good friend, Jack, who's a guidance counselor, who said one day, he said, you know, 5 years, 6 years later, he said, you're the type of person who would take the bar on a dare. And he didn't really dare me. He said, you would take it on a dare. So I thought about it, and I said, maybe I should take the bar, you know? And so I started studying for the bar. I took it 16 years after law school. And so I had all these books. There was like a shelf of all the books I had to memorize, and it was useless, because this is my issue with standardized testing. I mean, this is the ultimate standardized test, is the bar exam. And so I thought that maybe what I need to do, since it was just going in one ear and out the other, was I needed to draw the bar. I filled 28 pages in 10 weeks drawing this thing. And I would graph it out, because basically I can't understand text in a linear fashion. I mean, it just goes in one ear and out the other. I never reviewed it. It was entirely the act of drawing it. Because I had drawn it out, I would remember, oh, promissory estoppel, green arrow to red point in contracts. I visualized it and I saw it. If I had just read the text, it wasn't working for me. Some people, we all learn in different ways. That's the key thing. We all learn in different ways. This isn't the way to do it. This is the way that I did it.
This is Larry Rosenstock. This is Larry 35 years ago. Just after he dropped out of law school, he began teaching carpentry to inner-city kids in Boston. And what he learned, among other things, was that if kids were asked to build something they were excited about, they would, of their own volition, learn geometry. If they believed it would actually help them build a better table or better chair. Moreover, these kids would actually remember the geometry when they went to build the next table or chair. Back in the mid-90s, on the other side of the country, this man had a problem. His company was growing too fast, and he couldn't find enough qualified applicants to fill all the job openings he had. So by the year 2000, when Larry was writing and lecturing about what he was seeing as a teacher and teaching through asking kids to build stuff, Irwin and his board had an idea. What if they had Larry design a whole school, not just one class, but a whole school from scratch? The name of the school he built? High Tech High. From the moment we arrived, first hour, the first day of school actually, we could tell this place was different.
So the first thing you need to know is that this is Socratic seminar. The lines represent tables, the X's represent chairs. I want you guys to set up in Socratic seminar, please. They don't quite understand. You guys have to move tables and chairs in that formation right there. The lines represent tables, the X's represent chairs. I'm not going to help you guys, you have to figure this out. I think one of the things that we tell the kids is, listen, you have a choice. I can micromanage you through this thing, or you can do it on your own. So then I think what we do is we try to help them figure out ways how they can do it on their own rather than micromanaging every little tiny step. Some kids can do it, some kids can't. Ready? In a seminar, we just take turns. And I know that probably in your previous 8 years of school, you've been trained to raise your hands. Not in seminar. You need to talk to each other and get used to that instead of always looking at me. So what I'd like you to do, if you would pick out one of these boxes, you can give your opinion on it, you can say anything you want, just bring in any experience, and anybody can respond at any time, okay? So let's start with Samantha.
I like C3.
Would you care to elaborate on that?
Do I give advice?
What's that?
Well, I like it a lot because I've never thought about it that way, and it's really true.
Okay. Lena?
Sometimes, like, as she said, like, you have to only read textbooks and the teacher just talks and talks with, like, no emotion in their voice. Projects that aren't just not, like, reading and taking notes all day, filling out just boring assignments every day.
Define boring.
Like, it's hard to explain.
Anybody help her? Define boring. Okay. Try to imagine that we're going to get to a point where I'm not going to be here. I'm going to be sitting over there. It's a beautiful thing. Have a 30, 45-minute conversation with no adult. It's wonderful.
For freshmen, especially the ones who attended a traditional school previously, the first day at this school can be disorienting. High Tech High is a school in San Diego. 50% of the kids who attend High Tech High are considered low income. To attend, kids enter a lottery and are selected according to zip code. As a result, their demographic makeup duplicates that of other schools in their area. It's a public school, so they get public funds from the state in order to operate, but they actually get slightly less money per pupil and slightly less per teacher to do so. There are a number of things that make High Tech High unique. For instance, there are no bells here. The day is not divided up in class periods. Classes are not divided up into subjects. Instead, subjects are combined. Also, they hire teachers on one-year contracts, and in exchange, teachers are free to teach any way they want. Let me repeat that. What teachers teach, how much they teach, is entirely up to them.
So I'm not beholden to state standards, or, it's like we're not always talking about the mandated state tests. It's none of that. We teach what we think is best for the kids, and we also teach to our passions.
Teachers have a lot more autonomy. So one of our design principles is teacher as designer. So in a traditional setting, there will be a scope and sequence document of all the curriculum, and it's set by sort of somebody from without, and it's very clear, here's what it is, here's what you need to do. And so we have taken a different approach, which is that we try to hire teachers who have a strong passion for an academic area. That means that if you have 2 ninth grade teachers, they might not be covering the exact same material, which makes people feel very nervous. Like, well, of course, don't they all need to learn the same things?
They have a blank canvas there. They have a lot of freedom, they have a lot of flexibility, they do have a lot of accountability because there's no tenure and your contracts are renewed every year. But so many incredibly talented people would rather have that in return for the total intellectual freedom that they have.
So Scott and I, we started thinking about putting together a project for you guys for this semester. And we had a few different things we wanted to make and work on and cover.
So we're going to start with a basic concept. throughout history, different civilizations have come to be and then just as quickly gone away. And so we're going to start with, you guys are going to be working with Mike going over a lot of different ancient civilizations. Rome, Greece, Maya, Easter Island, and a bunch I probably don't even know about. And from that, you're going to distill some theory, something you find that explains why civilizations in general rise and also why they in general fall. So the next piece is we're going to take that very abstract concept and we're going to create a physical manifestation of it. You're going to find a way with gears and linkages that you can represent your social theory. And hopefully, if Mike and I can figure our stuff out, it's going to come together as a big, exhibitable piece.
We share a group of about 60 students. They're split in 2 classes, and we spend 2 hours a day approximately with each class. And so my class, they created these individual theories first and then group theories as to what trends they see, what commonalities they see in these different civilizations and how they rise and fall.
So we all have theories. I know that every theory is different. But all of our theories did something like this, right?
It's a difficult process to get a civilization back running, which is why I think it takes a lot longer than we would think for our cycles to actually go all the way through it. So.
Once the rebels overthrow the government, it kind of becomes like a never-ending cycle where they don't really become a strong government because they have disagreeable motives, so they're like controversial.
Yeah. Was there like an exploration component to yours at all, or was it other people coming in?
Not necessarily. It starts off at overpopulation, which is sort of like the peak of the civilization, and then goes down from there.
The whole time that was going on, in my class, I'd identified a bunch of skills they were going to need. We were using a new piece of equipment, a laser cutter. They were going to need to use the software to be able to use that. They were going to have to learn about what are gears, how do they work together, what is torque, what is angular velocity. And then we said, okay, here is your theory. Here are a bunch of tools you now have. How can you mechanically represent your theory in this way?
I want to break.
No. Because the ones that you just want the peg to go through easily, yeah, I know. Yeah, yesterday for some reason they were like sticking.
No, I took off an entire layer.
It's getting caught on this. On the positive side, it's still not gonna work.
But we're missing that piece, right?
Man, this thing is like.
I know. We need to cut off the peg, and then it'll work hopefully.
No.
Oh, it's because these pegs are too big.
Well, we could send it down.
Oh, yeah. Okay. This is everything I've done so far. It's all these pieces like prototypes, first drafts, revisions, and this is basically our system. We're gonna have 3 layers, and I'm making the 3rd layer right now. It just like, it's so hard to think about, but I don't feel behind anymore because only 2 groups are done.
Do you think you'll get done though?
Yeah, if I stay late every day.
So instead of a written cumulative exam or a final exam, we do things a little bit differently. All of our projects are planned around a public exhibition.
From its inception in 2000, High Tech High has had a night every term in which the public is invited to view student work. So how good a job a teacher's doing or how well a student is learning isn't judged by a multiple-choice standardized test. Instead, students, teachers, even administrators are all judged by this one night.
If you build a house, it's a project. If you make a school, it's a project. If you make a documentary film, it's a project. If you write a book, it's a project. Most of what people do in life involves observation, reflection, documentation, exhibition, and going through these different phases of being able to create something.
The kind of work we do in the real world and the kind of people who succeed in various kinds of job settings are those who are resourceful, resilient, will keep at it, will continue to learn, have a learning growth mindset. And when you organize learning around these kinds of intense projects, that's what actually builds grit. It builds perseverance, it builds resourcefulness, and it's what allows people to be successful when they get out of the artificial system we call school.
For all of human history, the primary focus of education has been acquiring more content knowledge, right? The whole idea is, you know more stuff, you're gonna be better off for whatever sets of reasons. And the only way to get it is through the teacher. You don't have to do that anymore. Today, content is ubiquitous. It's free. It's on every internet-connected device. And it's growing exponentially and changing constantly.
If we can compete with other countries, it's got to be in producing citizens capable of innovative thinking. Not citizens capable of industrial production, not citizens capable of assembling iPads. We're going to lose if that's what we think we're producing. The old blue-collar industrial model of education is already gone. We're already living in its wake. I think what we need to produce are the people who seem to do well in this new information economy, where creativity, a kind of anti-authoritarianism is celebrated, because these are people totally willing to try stuff, to fail, to learn from their failures, and to try again. We have to produce those kinds of kids. And if you notice, those are non-cognitive traits. I didn't say anything about, that they need to know this about the world, they need to know that. I think we're moving towards an education that's all about skills and much less about retention of a body of knowledge.
In the classroom, what do you think you need to work on the most? What do you think one of your weaknesses is?
So, I think one of my main weaknesses is being too shy and I remember when you asked me to say, let's get ready to, I wasn't able to. I think I really want to improve on becoming stronger, being confident in myself. I'm usually not that confident in myself.
If you've identified it as a struggle, what's your process to minimize it as something that holds you back or to overcome it?
Wait, why does a ninth grade physics teacher care about how confident his freshman student is? Qualities like confidence fall under the umbrella of what these new educators like to call soft skills. These soft skills can also include critical thinking, the ability to collaborate, the ability to learn from criticism, to persevere through trials, time management skills, work ethic, and even the ability to work on your own.
And the scary thing about project-based learning is, again, kind of turning over the classroom, not being teacher-centered, but being student-centered.
And so the room will have this chaotic feel where I think some people who are used to traditional environments of a child sitting in a desk filling out a worksheet, it terrifies them because there's lots of movement and lots of noise and lots of activity.
We'll start right away. Sophie, they're going to take the ladder down.
You got it, Grace?
Yep.
Suffering. Terrible is the fate
of Troy.
So the project we're doing this semester is Togonite, which was focused on 5th century Athens. So the kids learned a lot about 5th century Athens and the ancient Greeks. But they learned about a lot of other things too, because you could teach thematically. So we teach about leadership, foreign policy, human rights, which is when you're teaching ancient Greece, you can teach that.
While studying 5th century Athens, these students participated in a lot of Socratic seminars, class discussions.
It's trying to imply that the shadows sort of represent knowledge. Are we still going for that?
They believe two different things. This guy's like, I believe that, there's another world with way cooler stuff than these shadows.
Right, but that's also after you gain knowledge. So it has to do with knowledge.
A little bit.
Because you gain knowledge from going to the outside world and then you come back in and then your beliefs change.
They studied innovations like democracy. They had philosophical discussions on human rights. There were a number of papers they each had to write individually. In other words, a lot of traditional schoolwork. Where the other freshman class was studying the rise and fall of civilizations and they were going to create something with gears, these freshmen were to take all of their newly acquired knowledge about 5th century Athens and they were going to produce a play based on Euripides' Trojan Women. Because girls were not allowed to act in ancient Greece, there'd be two plays. One done by the boys, as it would have been done in Euripides' time, and an all-girls production, but with a twist. They were going to take this ancient Greek play and on their own, adapt it to modern-day Pakistan.
Where is she now?
The men are taking her to a prison, but she keeps complaining about a broken leg.
I don't care, broken or not, I want her now.
Yes, but I'll have her about 2 years.
When Samantha first got here, it was clear to us that she was one of the most engaged students we'd ever met. But she's so shy and reserved and quiet and meek. So when it came time to pick the director of the play, Mr. Gary puts a call out. He's like, whoever's interested can come and meet with me. When she was one of the students, I think we both felt that this could be huge for her.
So then Miss Deanna suggested wrapping it around the hat so it'll have that shape, but you can just take it on and off without having to literally wrap around the hat.
It's your decision.
Okay.
Okay.
I can ask them to try that.
I mean, unless it looks absolutely awful,
Yeah.
you guys go with it. Okay. It's your decision.
Yes.
How can you ask kids to make decisions if you never ask them to make decisions? How can you go through high school never having to make a decision, just sitting in rows and doing that death march of the textbook and just regurgitating, and then suddenly when you go on to life, it's like, oh, we want you to make decisions. Well, you've never asked me to make decisions before. I don't know how to do that.
Back? Oh, but they can't put the spotlight on it.
Let's try out a bunch of different stuff.
If it's right there, because then, I don't know. I kind of don't like the lights up too high.
I do. It looks better. Lighting's here. Christine, you got sound ready?
Yes.
Okay. Don't put all the work on them. There are only 4 people. Guys, there are only 4 people and they can't do everything. And I know that you can do a lot by yourselves. So actresses can put on their own costumes too, okay?
So like,
See the angle of the light? How it's kind of pointing up above you?
What do kids learn by just doing this play?
So I think the disconnect, and there are some parents, in fact, the mother of the director of the female play has concerns about this. I've talked to her about it before. That where's the content? Where's the proof that they're learning, X, Y, and Z?
No tests, no textbooks, no report cards. Teachers don't stand in front of the class. They don't have to sit down all day and listen to the teachers. It's scary. The other day I asked her, I was like, when are you going to learn geography and history? And where's Croatia? And what's the capital? When are you going to memorize all that?
What I'm seeing now, the test really doesn't have as much homework. And as a mom, and being our first year in a charter school, I have some anxiety about it. I'm worried about making sure she's prepared for SATs or the ACT.
So I worry a little bit if he's doing these projects and helping with each other, helping classmates and even understanding things more deeply like I did the other day, which as a human being I was thrilled with, but there's still in the back of my head going, is this going to prepare him for the test?
I went to Berkeley. I got my math degree from Berkeley. I did probably the most traditional process, right? I had to bust my butt and go through the hoops. And then I went into banking. I worked for an asset management firm, and I felt like I was not truly prepared to work in a team environment, to take on tasks that were very arbitrary and open-ended. I didn't know how to ask necessarily the best questions. And I think that there was a lot of things that I just didn't learn in college that I think these kids are actually learning now.
You knew all of the math in order to take those tests and get into Berkeley,
Yeah.
and then continue in math at Berkeley. And so I'm thinking, even though you're not learning the skills, the social skills and the team working skills that you learned once you got into the workplace, part of the back of my head is saying, well, you would have never made it to that workplace if you didn't jump through the hoops to get there. Because if you never learned the math curriculum and if you didn't do well and get into that school, you wouldn't have had that. And I'm still on the fence because I totally agree with what you're saying about, and I have to walk myself through this. Well, do I want him to do well on the SAT? Why? To get into college? Well, why? And kind of go. I've had to really re-examine all of those things, and why do I want the things that I want for him?
Yeah.
Because it's not like I'm just trying to get him into an Ivy League school or something like that. I'm really not. I want him to be happy, but I also want him to not have any doors closed.
This is scary for parents, How will this new type of education get kids into college? Most of us believe that school, for the most part, is less than useful in everyday life, but it's part of a game we've all agreed to play. Play the game right, and you end up presumably in the best colleges, and then you get the best jobs. And for 100 years, this has actually more or less been true. So while turning students into better collaborators or having them think more critically might seem like a great idea, won't changing a student's approach to education this radically inhibit their ability to get into a good college and do well in that college once they're there?
There's definitely a concern, I think, about the loss of content. There's no doubt that we take a lot of time. Our kids go on internships, they work with adults, they do a lot of depth in their work, and they definitely miss some of the breadth. There's no doubt about that.
I think we're doing great things. I think we're doing a project that is helpful for them as people, but I'm only covering, let's say, 40% of the content, 60% of the content.
For most people, the school day is judged by how much their kid has learned. In fact, every time policymakers have paused in a meaningful way to assess education in this country, they've always chosen the idea that kids should learn more, not less, which on its surface makes sense. That's what school is, right? To learn stuff. But consider AP US History. This class covers over 520 years, and it's a 32-week sprint from Columbus to the present day. To get through the curriculum, a student can only spend 3 class periods covering, say, the Civil War or World War II, and less than a class period on the Constitution. AP teachers often don't even take questions from students during class because there simply isn't time. Not if you want any hope of getting through the curriculum before the semester ends.
We're a nation obsessed with numbers. People in the political chain that have any responsibility for education want nothing more than to say we improved standardized test performance by 7% in the past year. Isn't everything working? But when you look at how that ripples down to the classroom, if your focus, if your measure of success is slight improvements on standardized tests on vocabulary and esoteric math, you are going to say, why are we teaching art? Why are we teaching scientific inquiry? Why are we encouraging kids to ask questions? Why are we dealing with inquisitive, curious kids in our class? Let's drill. Let's get that result that we can then put in the paper and say we're succeeding in education.
Watching my kids sit there and learn math and learn science and learn English and roll their eyes, and they're just, and I mean, just the other day I had a student say, I need to come in and get some help on this, but I don't want to do it until we're close to the test, because I want to make sure it's fresh on my brain for when I take the test. And I'm thinking, how problematic is that's what the goal is the goal is really to pass the test.
This is Vince, a math teacher from Douglas County, Colorado, who was worried that the math he was spending a semester teaching was disposable. As a result, he made some fairly bold changes. He even went to High Tech High for some ideas, all in hopes of creating a curriculum which focused on math problems that were more relevant to a student's life and less relevant to the state's standardized tests. But he met some resistance, and curiously, it came from some of his highest achieving math students.
But I mean, like, colleges in the long run, they look at your grades and like what you got in the class. They don't say, oh no, she had an understanding, it was just because of one little part. They see the letter grade, and that's what really matters.
Do you want Jim and Vince to train you guys to ace tests? Or would you rather Jim and Vince train you to be able to kind of apply stuff like this in your daily life or in your job later?
For me, it's
Please do.
I want to ace the test. That's how you get to college. That's how you get a job. Like, I feel like this like stuff in college, you focus on what you want to do with your life and like in the real world, and so I feel like that's when you should focus on that, because not everyone's going to go off and do math. So I feel like I would rather ace the test. That's just a personal opinion of mine.
I agree with that.
I think in high school you should be learning how to ace the test, and if you want to pursue more mathematical things in college, then they can teach you how to like do real life things if you want to learn that in college. But in high school you should be taught how to ace the test so you can get into college in the first place. Yeah. In my opinion.
What if that's so fascinating.
I thought your question was just a no-brainer. So for you all to say the other answer, do you want to do well in life or do you want to get into college? We want to get into college.
Increasingly in all schools in America today, even our very best public and independent schools, I see one curriculum and only one. It's test prep. What does that mean? Kids are spending an inordinate amount of classroom time preparing for predominantly multiple choice factual recall tests, the results of which tell us absolutely nothing about work, learning, or citizenship readiness in the 21st century.
If there's a teacher who spends all semester long prepping their kids to do well on a test, is that such a bad thing? Perhaps it is, or it isn't, depending on the quality of the test. Take, for instance, the SAT.
The SAT is supposed to test critical thinking and reasoning. That's at least how they present it. But the way that you succeed on this test is knowing the ways in which they've standardized it. They've made it predictable, and you have to then behave in a predictable manner. And the problem I run into is specifically with more intelligent students, is they want to get creative. You know, they want to answer a question, they really want to dig into it and think about all the possible ways that you could approach that. For doing well on this test, you kind of have to shut that entire process down. You have to divert away from that, and you just have to think in a really binary sort of black and white sense. You have to treat, the test is written to be scored by a computer, and I think as a student, I almost encourage them to think like a computer.
But what's worse is that when kids learn this way, they aren't even able to retain what they've learned. Consider a study done by Lawrenceville Academy, one of the most exclusive boarding schools in the US. They asked returning students to retake their science finals just 3 months after having completed their courses. Even though faculty eliminated all low-level details from the final, the average grade on these exams fell from a B+ to an F. Across 2 years and several courses, not one student still had command of all major concepts they'd presumably mastered just 3 months earlier.
One of the things we know from cognitive science research is that inert knowledge, that is, things that you memorize, spit back, and never use, does not stick. And about 90% of the things that you might take in, memorize, use on a test, and never use again disappear. You don't have those usable in your brain later.
If I were to show you a picture of students taking a test, you'd recognize it right away. The interesting question is this: have you ever encountered in your professional life a situation that is similar to the one in the test? I think in real life, you have access to any information you want. In real life, you can work with other people. Not only you can work, you probably have to work with other people, otherwise you can't solve the problems that you need to solve. So why is it that we're assessing students and students trying to predict students' future success in the workplace by putting them in an environment, in a situation that they will never, never, ever face in their future careers?
The problem for us, and what we see at Google, is that some of the people who do well in those things actually you don't want to work with because they're not great on teams, they're not collaborative, and the best, smartest people actually aren't the ones who always get the best grades.
When we hire at Khan Academy, and we're trying to hire people who software engineers and people who can help with content and help us do research, and these are the types of jobs that are these are the growth jobs of the 21st century, highly creative jobs, and we ask ourselves questions like, what are their logical and critical thinking skills? What's their ability to communicate? How curious is that person? How good is that person at giving and receiving feedback? How empathetic and self-aware are these people? And when we look at a resume, even from a fancy university, from Harvard or Stanford, or we don't know. 3.9 GPA doesn't tells us very little about that. It just tells us that they did well on a series of courses.
We do something to kids in our educational system where, a child is born knowing nothing. And all they want to do is learn, right? Every experience in the universe is new to you, right? And you're soaking this in and you're a learning machine. And we grind it out of them in our educational system. And we're taught not to learn. We're taught to memorize. We're taught to be very good at figuring out what it is that a teacher or a manager wants us to do, and then deliver what that teacher or manager wants.
And it seems like from what you're saying, nothing could be worse for your future in this economy than learning that skill.
Or for your soul.
Some might argue, look, developing creative problem-solving skills, this is great for the small percentage of people who will grow up and manage or run their own company one day. But the vast majority of people, they're still going to need some of these rudimentary skills that our traditional schools are really good at developing. Well, since Kasparov was beaten in chess, since Ken Jennings was beaten in Jeopardy, actually since the invention of the microchip, and a guy named Gordon Moore predicted that computers will double their ability every 2 years, we've seen first auto workers replaced on the assembly line, then workers in warehouses. Now we're seeing lawyers being replaced, people who write jobs reports. Very soon, people who drive for a living. They're going to have to look for something else to do, and what some are arguing is that any job that doesn't require critical thinking or advanced communication skills, or some form of human creativity, those jobs, they're all going to be gone. And they're going to be gone a lot faster than we thought.
We talk a lot about the average worker. We talk about the median worker. And the median is a statistical concept. It's just that person right at the 50th percentile, right in the middle of a pack. They're a customer service rep. They are a troubleshooter. They're a clerk of some kind. Maybe they're a sales associate. They're doing relatively low-level white-collar work. That's pretty clearly the stuff that is being automated most quickly these days. In other words, understand human speech, produce human speech, write clean prose, translate among languages, recognize patterns in a visual field. Technology could never, ever do any of those things before. And really just in the blink of an eye, suddenly it can do those things, can do them quite well. And the reason that that's a challenge is that that's right where the average worker has been. That's right where we've built up the large, stable, prosperous American middle class. And that middle class is pretty clearly under threat right now.
If this is true, parents are likely being asked to make a bet. One side of the bet, continue down the traditional path. It's worked for the better part of a century. Maybe we can make some small modifications to it, test it more, maybe lengthen out the school day, shorten the summer. In other words, keep it the same, just make it harder. The other side of the bet is to completely reimagine school. Truthfully, there's no long-term study that proves this form of learning will work any better than the current educational model. And this can be nerve-wracking, especially when you're a parent who's considering this type of school for your own kid.
Okay. There you go.
Could you sit right there?
You have got to sit in the back. That is the safest place in the car.
I get the sense you're fairly protective of your daughter.
Just a little bit. Not too much. Just as long as she stays with me forever. She can maybe get married when she's 80, but before that, she stays with Mama.
Describe some of the anxieties that you had about the school. Like, what were the particular anxieties? What were things that you were nervous about?
That she was not going to have books, no textbooks, and that she wasn't going to have the traditional subjects. I wanted to see grammar, literature, math, 1 hour each, and now this is like blocks of things where everything is, all of the subjects are running together, where she's learning everything without borders between one subject and another.
So why'd you come here?
Something is going on. I mean, I do like grammar and history and geography and all that, but there's something going on where all of my friends' kids, they're graduating as architects or engineers or this or that. They're in their 30s and they're working for Mom and Dad. After going to Francis Barker and, Cornell, and I see it happening, and it scares me.
Even if you're inclined to bet on this new type of education, it still seems risky. For one thing, how do you assess someone's ability to collaborate or to persevere? In other words, how do you test for it?
There are several of them, but one of them is just publicly exhibiting work. So I think that anyone should come here to an exhibition and judge for themselves.
It's a big moment because the students are going to present their work to the world, and it's going to be high quality, or it's not going to. In some cases it is, in some cases it's not. It's still an accountability strategy, it's still a pushing strategy, but it's just what do you want to be held accountable to? Test scores? Kids producing high quality work.
So for that first stanza about the Taliban and the helicopters, I want you to have no burqa. Okay. So while, after your scene, when you put this dress on, don't put the burqa on. And they will know that. I want you to leave your burqa off, I want you to keep your bun, and I want you to keep your bun so that you're two men running across.
Yes. Wait, but who changed this? It was working before.
No, it's because
yeah. Well, okay.
No.
I know.
No.
Saying that, I'm going to give you a grade at the end of this term on your final exam is one thing. Saying your parents, all your friends' parents, and a bunch of people you don't know are going to be here to see the work you did on this date. And I think that is a very natural piece of motivation for students. I also think it creates an aspect of authenticity, because we are creating something for an audience.
I made it 0.1 inches instead of 0.5 because it allows you to have more teeth on a smaller gear, and since we have a lot of gears, it allows us to do more in a smaller space. And it's not even done yet, which is a bad thing, but it will be done.
I think project-based learning means you're actually making and doing things and finishing something. Finishing is so important.
Because projects are very frustrating. You don't cover as much content ground as you would in textbook learning. And at the same time, it's hard because when you're making something, you don't get the immediate rewards that you do when you're just memorizing something and getting an A on the test every week.
So now it's starting to get a little harder, but it still runs pretty smooth, right?
Yeah. Now imagine that without this one driving. I mean, I think it just makes the whole thing a little bit easier.
I remember the conversations when he first started doing a lot of this, where I'd say, Brian, there's what most people are doing, what you're talking about, and then there's really hard, and then you're somewhere past that.
Most like crazies.
How is that, Hammer?
It'll work. As long as it gets the job done.
Working with groups, I think, is the hardest part for kids because they have to rely on other people in order to get things done. It's not just a one-person show where one kid can do everything that they're supposed to do. And so I've seen kids really get into some intense arguments around exhibition time.
But make sure all the lines
No, it's already done. It's done. It's done. Come on. Okay, Jose, it works.
My group leader, Brian, he procrastinates a lot. He wants this big thing done, but yet he still keeps adding more to it. He keeps adding more pieces to what was going to be simple, then he makes it a big, difficult thing.
When that's in red, that's hard to see.
Don't hit that one. Why did we make the teeth so small?
It's going to be ready by tomorrow?
Yeah.
A little bit?
Yeah, just a little bit. I want it to work. I want it to, because I still have quite a ways to go, and we only have a day.
Just think of what would happen if the Taliban found out. The consequences, the retaliation. You're looking at me like it would be unthinkable. I do not want that for Aisha.
This is not the point in the play where we have to be doing
It's not safe.
No, we're starting from the beginning of the scene. Guys, please, it's tomorrow and I'm freaking out. We have to get this.
I think that the best is brought out in all of us, in large part because we make the work public and we all look at it. So we can tell good stories about the work we're trying to do, but then ultimately, tomorrow night, we're going to look at the work, and some of it's going to be great, and some is going to be not so great.
It's more like an exhibition of what they've learned to do, like to collaborate. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. It's not, you can't, it's to get these kids to collaborate and work together, and because it does require everybody to do it.
The exhibition is on them. It's their exhibition. It's up to them to prove what they've learned, what they've been doing, to be able to articulate that to various audiences. So it's their exhibition. So they feel a lot of pressure and responsibility on themselves to make it look right.
It's the evidence of what you've been doing. I mean, no matter how hard you try, like, people come in and, you know, the kids are in an environment the teacher creates. Mike and I are the only ones that create that environment. We have complete control over it. I mean, they spend, 5 hours a day, every day for a school year. It's a long time. And whatever culture is in the class is evident whether you want it to be or not in exhibition.
See how they're like not going. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Let's just pick it.
For most of you, this is probably the biggest project that you've ever exhibited. A lot of you, it's the first project that you've ever really had a public exhibition of.
The most impressive thing to me is how crazy it is to me, and how much I'm, in terms of learning from him, how crazy it is to turn everything over to you guys and let you run it all. And I think what we're striving for all of you is that you become independent in getting tasks completed. Because if you can do that, then you can do anything in life.
This is when you get to show off. It should be the moment where you've been working so hard and spending so many extra hours, putting so much effort in that you're excited to show people what you've done. Cool. We're going to be here. If you need to go, we understand, but we're going to keep working for a few hours. Break.
I think that we want students doing work for a real audience, and that totally changes the entire dynamic. If the assignment is you get it back and you crumple it up and throw it in the trash can, that's kind of one student experience. And if the assignment is to produce something that you're going to present to professionals in the field, that's completely changing the whole dynamic.
And when you're doing that with kids, they're not saying to you, why am I learning this? They know why they're learning it, because it's not going to fit. It's not going to work.
I'm nervous. I mean, it looked way better than before lunch, so I think it's gonna be good. I just think we need to practice more.
Country, these girls deserve to go to school. It's only right.
Yeah, but more arm movement, more. Yeah, better. Not like hello, but like boom.
Does that look real? It looks pretty real.
I need to print out all these different boards, and I need to make them out of acrylic, and I need to make this look nice, like with words. And it's something, I keep on realizing I need to do all these other things. And it's just this weight that just never really goes away and keeps on getting bigger and bigger and weighing more. But I really do want to finish it, and I can't wait for that moment when it does work and I'm completely done with it. And it just like all leaves. It'll be one of the greatest moments of my life. I'm really interested in how it works. I'm interested in how it's made. I'm interested in everything that has to do with it. And I really don't want to let people down. And I really just want to work on it, finish it, be proud of it. Yeah.
just like you've been doing it all rehearsal. You've done it in front of the entire class. You've done it in front of the entire other class. These are just parents. Parents won't say anything mean.
Smiling? And you can't even tell.
Rodrigo just finished his scene, so we're getting close.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Stand up, Elena. Close your eyes. Ready? Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. Focus.
I think she views herself differently now than at the beginning of the year when she saw herself as somebody who couldn't connect and make friends. And now I think she knows that she can, but that she can also lead people. And I think it's been a powerful experience for her.
When you get out there, you're gonna do an awesome, completely best job you've ever done in the world. Doesn't matter if it's the best acting job ever done in the world, it's the best acting job you've ever done in the world, okay? And then you're gonna get off stage, everyone's gonna be clapping, they're gonna be cheering, you're gonna go up to your mom and she's gonna be so proud. And your dad is gonna be like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you had that in you.
These girls deserve to go to school, it's only right. You do not understand what is right. You're trying to create a secure environment where the purity of women may once again be sacred.
If the Taliban found out, the consequences, the retaliation, it would be unthinkable. I do not want that for Aisha.
I think that in a lot of teachers' minds, we have this idea of what we want the thing to look like at the end, like the end product. But that's our idea. That's not their idea. Let them be creative. Get rid of your ideas, what you think it should look like. Let them produce what they want to produce.
Where is she? Where is she? Where is Malala? I said, where is she? If you don't tell me, I will kill all of you. She's over here. This girl, right here. It's Malala. No, it's not me, I swear. Please.
Malala has done the courageous act of sharing the unrighteous actions of the Taliban with the eyes of the world. The Taliban has retaliated against her in this horrible, violent way. Yet against all their actions, she has survived. When they tried to silence her, they did exactly the opposite, and now the world knows her name. Malala has demonstrated that in order to see real change, you must stand up for what you believe in.
Completely student run. They did it from start to finish. To me, this is what it's about. You realize that you're capable of things that you weren't capable of before.
Chipping too, but I think it's
okay. I see it. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
There you go.
Go screw it in.
We can set. Okay, you set it up everything here, and then we'll just have the sprockets on this board and the top thing on this board.
Well, these don't have holes.
It's gonna work fine. Flip it.
No, don't flip it.
Wait, don't do it. Don't do it. We got surprise people.
That one's not ready.
Oh yeah.
Oh
yeah. That's not ready at all. Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah, come on. Okay, start putting the sprockets. Okay? Where? On there.
Just on these?
No.
Dude, we don't have time, Frenchie. We got held back. Oh no.
Terrible. Wait, no. Hold on, just spin it. I want to see if this will. Wait.
Hey, I can lock tie real quick.
Tomorrow I'm gonna be back to my dope.
Go!
This fell largely size over there, but this is basically how it turned out.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because we researched the Mayan civilization and Greek and Roman.
So did you have to scan that and put it on Illustrator to get that? Is really cool.
The things I think in life that give us some of the greatest satisfaction, and for children too, is making something that wasn't there before. We all derive fantastic satisfaction. It could be a song, it could be a garden, but making something. Kids have that feeling it's transformative for them. I made this, and everyone's coming to look at it. And you have that feeling that we all have, like, how did they do that?
This is like, I've seen the projects of High Tech High for like 7 years, and this is up there.
It's all timed based on their original proposal, and these images every 3 turns, this hole lines up with those images, and it's all tied directly to their theory of why civilizations rise and fall. Bam!
And it's important for the teachers because it's such an affirming thing to see the work and the performances of the students.
They came up with all the drawings and engravings that you see. They push the buttons and cut the stuff out. Pretty cool, huh?
I mean, that was basically my first full year teaching my own class. I had a very noticeable shift in kind of like my faith in positive outcomes. I don't know, I just saw so many transitions, so many students that started as uninvolved or socially impaired or really academically challenged that came out as different people. Not perfect, but better than they came in. And just seeing that, it makes me, like, it convinces me I have value in my role. That makes me feel like I matter in some way.
I'm gonna go cut this, okay? Where are the other shafts? Okay, no, Walker, where are the other shafts? The other what?
He was a little bit disappointed because he was certain that he would have been able to finish, but he realized little piece didn't work, and more he was working on it, the more he realized that he had to redo the pieces, and that's how he was disappointed.
We all learn by making mistakes. The whole thing about this is doing it better the next time, and that's really okay to say that. Next time you're going to do it better, and you're going to do it by making mistakes and learning through doing.
So Brian was one of a few who, despite their efforts, did not have something to show on exhibition night. And while we had this big wheel with a whole bunch of mechanisms on it functioning, theirs was not a part of it. And so the question that they naturally ask themselves is, like, why did that happen? And some kids, this is an emotional event. And for Brian, I think this was a real self-check where he it gave him a chance to think critically about his actions that we never would have been able to break through by pushing. I never would have gotten there just by saying, Brian, these are some characteristics I need you to have. But by seeing his efforts not work, I think that opened him up a little bit more to commentary on, like, what might be improved.
I don't know where exactly things happen, but I think I have an idea of what I'm going to do, but I don't actually do it until last minute.
Could you talk a little bit about planning the process and the presentation and what seems to be a little bit of a pattern of things getting lost somewhere between those 3 Ps, plan, process, presentation?
I was in charge of the mechanism. It's still not done. And I might have hurt my group members a little bit because I didn't really listen to their ideas.
One of the things that is special about you is that you're a visionary person, and so we do not want to hammer that out of you.
That is not our goal. We don't want you to stop being Brian.
If we lecture them, maybe, if they can perform on an exam, they're going to forget it. I think these soft skills that they're learning in terms of collaboration, the teamwork, how to show up and produce, I think that's going to stay with them. They're not going to forget this stuff. I'm like astonished in a way about something, your voice. Because all first semester, it was sometimes really difficult to even hear you. Can you talk a little bit, reflect a little bit about the development of your voice this year?
Well, my mom uses my voice as an example, but when I meet new people, my voice tends to be really, really high-pitched and really annoying. I'm just like, hi guys, and you can barely hear me. And that's just because I'm so shy, and my little voice comes out when I start acting like that, when I start trying to just be polite and do things that are right so that people will like me.
Is it possible to be confident and behave in a way where people will like you and enjoy being around?
Yes, but in order to do that, you have to be confident with yourself. And this is one of the absolute most important things, I think, that I learned this year. It's good to make other people smile. It's good to smile yourself, but it's also good to have new experiences. It's also good to learn, to go through struggles so that you come out knowing something new.
I think you'd agree that girl has traveled a pretty great distance over this last school year.
She's not the only one. This is why I believe in what we do here, because all of them have had a tremendous amount of growth. I told them this morning, I said, you guys remember what you were like when you walked in here in August on the first day and how you are now? They've all experienced growth as a class, as a group, but also a lot of individual growth.
It's a school full of nerds. Okay, how am I gonna fit in there? Like, I'm not smart like that, I'm not nerdy. But I came here and I found out I'm a little more nerdy than I thought I was.
It really helped me find my strength, which I now feel is writing, and it made me feel like an author and an artist in a way.
I have always been a good follower, and I always thought I was such a good follower until this year when I was told I was a good leader. I was taken aback. I didn't believe it. I thought, who could I ever lead and who would ever want to follow me? But then I realized I have led myself to become so much more of a stronger and intelligent person this year, and that the people who follow me follow my examples.
The current systems of education fails to recognize that all students are people, that they have feelings, they have motivations, they have aspirations, they have lives and biographies and circumstances. And as soon as you miss that point, as soon as you start talking about students as data points, you're in big trouble. And the trouble's evident. We've got hundreds of thousands of people going to college every year. And when they leave, they are not in anything like the situation that college graduates used to be in. It used to be the case when I was at college that if you had a college degree, it was pretty much a guarantee of a job. Pretty much. It's not now.
As we go from an industrial economy to an information economy, our most valuable part of capital in the economy is no longer going to be industrial capital, it's going to be human capital. That's going to define which nations succeed. That's going to define which nations have a broad and rich middle class. That's going to define which nations are innovating, which nations are strong militarily. It's all going to be based on how innovative and creative and entrepreneurial its people are, how much ownership they have, how much curiosity they've been able to retain through their life.
So I really think we need to put in place educational environments that help the kids understand that the world is an interesting place and their job is to go understand it, probe it, change it, and poke at it. Those are still skills I haven't seen computers display.
Right now, we are attempting to educate a generation of kids who will work in jobs that have not been invented yet. They will be called on to solve problems in a world so complex we can't even imagine it. How do you design a school system that prepares kids for that? While there's no long-term study to prove that this type of learning will provide better results than our current schools, there are some statistics that are interesting. For instance, In spite of the fact that teachers don't waste 1 minute teaching to the state tests, High Tech High, curiously, still performs above the state average. A more surprising statistic? Look at how many kids they get into college. But that's just college, and as we've discussed, that's not a guarantee of anything. To really know whether a school like High Tech High works, we'll have to wait another 10 to 15 years. While the early returns are promising, High Tech High is just too new, sample size too small, to know if it will truly prepare kids for the 21st century. And that makes educators, politicians, and especially parents hesitant to try this new way of teaching.
For a parent, what I would say is there is a chance that they will come out without all of the extremely tangible skills and content that they would get at a normal high school. That is a definite possibility. They might know a few less equations. They might not have gotten quite as deep into calculus. Those things might happen. But if we're going to believe that the content knowledge we're trying to impart on them in a traditional school is not being retained, then I would argue, what is it again that they're missing? Because in that environment, they're leaving with a fraction of some of the content they could have had or learned at one point. Here, they're going to leave with an extreme depth of some content and a whole bunch of other soft skills. They're going to have grit. They're going to be able to persevere through difficulty. They're good at communicating with adults and their peers. They're collaborative. They have empathy. All these things that are not things that disappear your junior year of high school. And so when parents ask that, and they do ask that all the time, it's really kind of a, what do you want out of your student? Who do you want them to be?
Over 100 years ago, the United States went from one-room schoolhouses to the robust industrial model we have now. It was a transformation that was nothing short of miraculous. Perhaps it's time for another transformation. Over the past 2 years, we filmed at schools all over the country. We visited private schools, charter schools, even traditional public schools and colleges. In each of them, we saw talented women and men in all grade levels taking bold steps to depart from the century-old educational model. Whether they were combining multiple disciplines, banning APs, giving teachers greater autonomy, focusing on depth of learning, offering real-world internships, having kids collaborate on projects. The common thread between all these schools is that the students appear to be working on things with a sense of purpose.
This is your best friend. Believe it or not, as heavy as it is, well, best friends usually have a little weight on them. So they're, you know, you can't usually pick them up. But what's nice about this book is you can look things up if you're not sure. It has a little...
As I consider the kind of education I want for my own daughter, how do I predict what will give her the best shot at future happiness, at being successful, whatever that means? Even High Tech High would be the first to say that their particular approach isn't for every student. Of the schools we visited, no two were alike, and maybe that's the point. Education, real education, is messy, and any attempt to standardize it through federal or state governments or bureaucratic committees will lead to a system that ignores this one irrefutable fact.
Education is a complex human system. It's about people. And people are natural creatures. We're organic creatures. You know, we grow and we evolve and we change. And if you have an industrial metaphor in your head, then you're led into the sort of language that we now use about standardization. And the thing is, it's much more like gardening than engineering. If you're a gardener, you don't make it grow. I mean, the plant grows itself. You don't kind of attach the leaves and paint the petals and, you know, and screw in the roots. I mean, the thing grows itself if you create the right conditions.
it's so tempting to just get in there and like fix it, just to watch them make the mistake after mistake. It's hard sometimes.
Human resources are like the world's natural resources. They're buried beneath the surface. You know, if we find things that energize us, things we love to do, you can't keep us down.
How are you not ecstatic right now?
Nothing is here.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh, that's awesome.
Walk over to the big room. Let's do a dry fit. See that go? It's all gonna disintegrate.
Toi, tu le tiens? You got it?
Yeah.
Okay.